Chapter 24 of Pee Wee Harris on the Trail. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by John Brandon. Pee Wee Harris on the Trail by Percy Keese Fitzhugh. Chapter 24. Deserted. Mr. Swiper lost no time upon hearing Peter's startling announcement. Rushing to the back of the car, he confirmed the information by a frantically hurried inspection, keeping up a running fire of curses the while. For a manual training teacher, he was singularly profane. Nor did he tarry to administer any corporeal rebukes, more than to send poor Peter reeling as he brushed him aside with imprecations in his flight. Since the auto had been so generously handed to him by a kind Boy Scout, perhaps the loss of it was not such a shock as it might otherwise have been. There were other autos. Mr. Swiper saved himself, and that was his chief concern. He was not going to take any chances with Ham Sanders. In the last few miles of their inglorious journey, Pee Wee had been trouble enough to him, and how to get rid of that redoubtable youngster had been a question. So Mr. Swiper paused not to make an issue of Peter Piper's audacious act. He withdrew into the shelter of the woods, and in the fullness of time to the more secure shelter of an Illinois penitentiary, where he was entered under the name of Chick Swiper, alias Chick the Speeder, alias Chick the Gent, alias the Car King, alias Jack Skidder, perhaps because he was so slippery. In his official pedigree there was nothing about his being a manual training teacher, though he must have had some knowledge of the use of tools, for he removed the bars from his cell window with praiseworthy skill, and was later caught in Michigan, I think. So there sat Pee Wee glaring down upon Peter, still frightened at himself for the stir that he had made in the great world. "You foiled him," said Pee Wee. "Do you know what? He was a thief. He was stealing this auto." "Yes, and you're a thief, too," said Peter, removing the lantern from the rope and holding it up toward the auto. He was quite brave and collected now. "And if you want to run, you better do it before anybody comes. That's what I'll tell you. You're dressed up just like a thief, I can tell. Anyway, you can't take the auto." "Do you call me a thief?" shouted Pee Wee. "That shows how much you know. I'm a Boy Scout. Do you think Scouts steal things?" "That shows how much you know about logic. You're a thief." "You can't fool me," Peter retorted courageously. "Look at the way you look. I'm not scared of you either, or him either." "How can I look at the way I look?" Pee Wee fairly screamed at him. "You're crazy. I told him where it was, and I told him." "That shows that you're just as bad as he is," Peter insisted. "Are you going to stay here till Ham Sanders comes and be arrested?" "Anyhow, you're arrested now," he ventured, "and you have to wait." "You tell me I'm arrested?" Pee Wee yelled. "When I'm taking this car back to its owner? Do you know what a Boy Scout is?" "I know what they look like. They're all dressed up in uniforms," poor Peter said. "But you can be one without that." "Now, you see, you said so yourself," Pee Wee began. "But they don't get dressed like thieves," Peter retorted. "I'm on your side because you stopped him," shouted Harris. "I don't want you on my side," said Peter. "I'm a scout, and I don't want any robbers on my side." "You?" said Pee Wee. "Yes, me. I bet you don't even know. I bet you don't even know how many. That shows you don't know anything about Scouts at all," said Peter. "I've got a book that tells all about it. And when a man comes, you're going to get arrested." "Me arrested?" "Yes, you. You helped him to steal it. And I don't believe anything you say. and you needn't think you can fool me. If you were a scout, you wouldn't be scared to run away in the woods now." "I've been. I—" "You're crazy," shouted Pee-wee, fairly bursting with indignation. I've been lost in the woods more times than you have." "Scouts don't get lost," said Peter. "They get lost so they can find their way," Pee-wee yelled. "That shows how much you know. If scouts didn't get lost, how could scouts rescue them? You have to get lost. The same as you have to get nearly drowned. Do you want me to start a fire without a match? That'll show you I'm a scout. Only I'd have to have a certain kind of a stone. I can eat a potato from a stick without it going round. That'll prove it." "Have you got a roasted potato?" "No. And I wouldn't give one to a feller that steals automobiles either," said Peter. "I got a signal and I stopped you." "I know all about signaling, and you didn't get one either," Pee-wee shouted in desperation. "I know all about everything about scouting. I know. I can prove I can drink out of a spring without the water going up my nose. So that's a test. I had a lot of adventures tonight. I was with thieves, and I'll tell you all." "I know you were," said Peter, "and you needn't tell me about it because I can tell by looking at you. Do you think you can make me think you own this car and get roasted potatoes from me too, and run away when I show you where the spring is so you can prove it? The man that owns this car is a friend of mine, and he gave me a quarter." "You're a thief, and I don't care what you say," said Peter, his agitation rising with his anger. "And it's miles and miles to a village, and there's nothing but woods." "Scouts can eat moss, they can," Pee-wee interrupted. "And you can't fool me," Peter continued. "I'll go scout pace for you," Pee-wee said with a sudden inspiration. "Yes, you'll go scout pacing away." "Will you let me speak?" Pee-wee fairly screeched. "No, I won't. You're a robber, and now you're caught, and it serves you right, because you didn't find out about the scouts and join them and have fun that way, and then you wouldn't have to go to jail for stealing." W. Harris, mascot of the Raven Patrol, 1st Bridgeboro Troop, looked down with withering scorn upon the shabby advocate of scouting, and Peter Piper returned the look fearfully, yet bravely. After the tremendous thing he had done, he was not going to be fooled by this hoodlum crook who seemed to have haphazard knowledge of those wonderful far-off beings in natty khaki and shining things hanging from their belts. He would not even discuss those misty, unknown comrades with this lawbreaker. Anybody might learn a little about the scouts, even a thief. "You don't know anything about them," he said, holding up his head, as if proudly claiming brotherhood with those distant heroes in their rich, wonderful attire. "I wouldn't talk about them, because I know about them, even if they don't know me. They sent me a message. They didn't know, but they did it just the same, so I belong too. You can make believe you have a uniform, you can. You can be miles and miles and miles and miles." He paused and listened. Down the road, in the still night, sounded the gentle melody of clanking milk cans mingled with the pensive strains of loose and squeaking wheels. It was the melodious orchestra which always heralded the approach of Ham Sanders, who was so strong that he could handle a bull. "Do you think I'm scared?" said Pee-wee. Evidently he was not. End of chapter 24. Recording by John Brandon.